So today I'm happy to start us off with a presentation of results from a series of retrospective mortality surveys done in August and September of last year in 3 camps in eastern Chad among Sudanese refugees and Chadinese returnees who had fled the violence in Sudan. So Claire already touched a little bit on the context, the situation, but since April 15th of 2023, the civil war between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces has caused a major crisis in Sudan. So violent fighting broke out all over the country, including Darfur, considerably exacerbating already existing inter-community tensions. By September of last year, more than 420,000 people had fled to Chad, including over 327,000 in Wadai province alone. These people were mainly Sudanese refugees, but also returnees, Chadian nationals who had been living in West Darfur before the outbreak of violence. So in order to better understand, describe, and respond to this existing situation, our study objectives were the following: to describe the population in terms of age, sex, and origin, to retrospectively estimate the crude mortality rate and the main causes of death during the recall period, and finally, to assess the frequency and type of violent events that were experienced by household members during the recall period. So as described by Claire earlier, we carried out cross-sectional retrospective mortality surveys in the camps of Tumtuma, Orang, and Arkum in eastern Chad, so 3 fairly distinctive camps as described by Claire. The minimum sample size calculated was 1,026 households per camp in order to achieve a representative sample of each of the 3 camps. In Tumtuma camp, we selected the population using systematic random sampling. In Orang and Arkum, we used spatial random sampling based on a random selection of rooftops from the most recent satellite image available. The survey included a face-to-face interview with household head using a standardized questionnaire, information on age and sex of the household members, and dates for new arrivals, births, departures, and disappearances, and deaths were also noted. To assess mortality, the household head was asked if any deaths were reported during the recall period, and further information including age, sex, reported date, cause, and place of that death were collected. Episodes and violence and the type of violence, including beating, sexual, shooting, stabbing, detainment, kidnapping, or other, were also recorded for all of the household members. So we considered a recall period from January 1st, 2023 to the date of the interview with 2 phases. The pre-crisis phase, which was from January 1st until March 14th in Tumtuma and until April 14th in Orang and Arkum. The crisis phase was from March 15th to the day of the survey in Tumtuma and April 15th to the day of the survey in Orang and Arkum. Among households in Tumtuma camp, we considered an earlier start date in the crisis phase due to inter-community tensions that erupted at the end of March in West Darfur and drove important population displacements towards Chad. So the 3 carries were carried out in August and September of 2023. More than 1,000 households were included in each of the 3 camps, with an average household size of 5.9 in Tumtuma and Orang and 4.9 in Arkum. Here we can see the age-sex pyramids for the households included in the 3 camps. So we observe a clear underrepresentation of men in the age group 15 to 29 years old in the 3 sites, with the sex ratio indicating 6 to 7 men for every 10 women. In Tumtuma and Arkum, we observe similar tendencies also in the age group 30 to 44 years old. So you've already seen this, been introduced to this map by Claire before, so we present here the village or town of the origin for the households included, as well as the location of the 3 camps. So all 3 of the camps are on, well, let's not try that. Okay, all 3 of the camps are on the left side of the map and highlighted with camp symbols. The circle size indicates the proportion of households coming from each location. In blue, those from Arkum, in red, those from Orang, and green, those from Tumtuma. As you can see, almost all of the households surveyed came from West Darfur. In Areng and Arkum, 99% of households were refugees, and in Areng, 91% came specifically from the town of El Geneina, while in Arkum, 47 and 33% came from Congo and Mistere, respectively. In Tumtuma, on the other hand, 60% of households were refugees, 36% returnees, and 4% internally displaced. The majority came from Umdam, Tandoti, and El Geneina. So in all three camps, the crude mortality rate was significantly higher during the crisis phase than during the pre-crisis phase. The mortality rate was particularly high in Areng, where we observed 2.25 deaths per 10,000 people per day during the crisis phase, compared to 0.11 deaths per 10,000 per day pre-crisis. In addition, many households in all three camps reported missing members, with disappearances during the crisis phase ranging from 0.5 per 10,000 per day in Arkom to over 1 per 10,000 per day in Areng. So here we present the crude mortality rates by sex. So as with the crude mortality rate, the rates are significantly higher during the crisis phase. Among men in the Areng camp, the specific mortality rate is particularly high, which goes from 0.6 before the crisis to almost 4 during the crisis phase, which is equivalent to a 24-fold increase. Among women, an increase in mortality was observed during the crisis phase among households in Areng, but no significant differences were observed in Tumtuma and Arkum camps. Although not presented here, we observed similar trends for mortality in among children under 5 years old, with a significantly higher rate during the crisis phase in Areng camp, but no significant differences for Tumtuma and Arkum. So here we present the cause of death. So violence, and more specifically shootings, were the cause for the majority of deaths in all three sites. So in Tumtuma and Areng, deaths linked to violence were the cause for around 80% of deaths. In Arkum, half of deaths were linked to violence. Diarrhea was the second leading cause of death among households in Tumtuma and Arkum, and measles in Areng. Most deaths occurred in the village of origin or during the displacement towards Chad, with few deaths reported after arrival in the three camps. So here we present the number and percent of violent deaths by age group and sex in each camp. So what is particularly striking here is the deaths linked to violence among men 30 and older. Among households in Tumtuma, around 4% of all men aged 30 and over died of violent causes, and in Arkum, almost 4% of all men 30 to 44 died of violent causes among all household members. Among households in Areng, more than 1 in 10 of all men aged 30 and over died of violent causes during the recall period. In addition, the disappearances that we referred to earlier reported by the households mainly concerned males in the age 15 and older. So here we present the number and percent of violent deaths by household of origin across the three camps, with the most frequent cities or villages of origin. In the three camps, if we pool all of the data together, 2.4% of all listed household members from El Geneina died from violent causes, around 5 times what was observed among households of all other origins. There was also several deaths linked to violence reported among household members from Mistere and Tandoti. So here we analyze the overall frequency of violence, i.e. the number of people in the household who had experienced at least one episode of violence during the recall period. Among all household members, the frequency was 3.3% in Tumtuma, 11.7% in Areng, and 4.4% in Arkum. The main types of violence reported were beatings, 2.3% of household members in Tumtuma, 8.3% in Areng, and 3.5% in Arkum, and gun violence, 0.9% in Tumtuma, 4.1% in Areng, and 0.7% in Arkum. Few cases of sexual violence were reported during the survey. The risk of stigmatization and the challenges that are associated with confidentiality in camp settings may have led to underreporting of sexual violence and other forms of violence, including intrafamily violence. So our conclusions are the following. We observed high mortality rates, with most deaths linked to violence, and excess mortality observed among men. The crude mortality more than doubled in Tumtuma and tripled in Narkum during the crisis phase. Households in Orang, mostly coming from El Geneina, appear to have been particularly affected, with the mortality rate 20 times higher than before the crisis. Mortality is probably underestimated due to survival bias. Households that completely disappeared before arriving at the camp or where surviving members joined other households are not represented in the sampled population. Finally, these surveys were not representative of all households that had fled Sudan, only those in the 3 camps included during the survey period. Populations who fled to countries other than Chad or who remained in Sudan are then not described in these results. The results show the importance of investigating and quantifying the extent of the violence suffered by these populations. Repeated retrospective mortality surveys combined with documentation of village destruction and population displacements are important to more concretely document the conflict and understand the conflict dynamics. Thank you for your attention. This study would not have been possible without the hard work and dedication of the study teams in the field and also the support of the MSF teams in Chad and France, including Pascal Udraga, who implemented the survey in Chad. And we thank also the Ministry of Health and the camp authorities for approval and support during the implementation of the survey. And lastly, of course, we are really thankful for all of the study participants for their time and participation and willingness to share their experiences.